Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome. Welcome to the second annual symposium, Earth's Cry, Humanity's Call. This year, in particular, focus is on reimagining economy for people and the planet. I'm Brother Michael Perry. I'm working with Brother Jacek, some of you know him, and Brother Jimmy. The three of us work at the Laudato Si Center for Integral Ecology, begun in 2023. It's that place where you walk by on the way to Joya Center for your finances. It's a little house. It used to be called Carriage House. Now it's actually got our name, the name of our center. So it's open much of the time. So the doors are always open if you want to drop by there for coffee and talk with some of the other students. We have seven or eight now. I think we have 8 student workers, and we have some young adult volunteers. Our youngest volunteer is 94 years old, and he's here. I'm not going to embarrass him, but he's here with several other volunteers who are working with us. So we're very pleased. The exciting thing about this particular year is the Laudato Si Center is working very closely with the School of Business and with the Spirit of 68 Committee to host this event, this symposium. Earlier today, we were able to have an amazing discussion. I'm not going to go into those points, but an amazing discussion on Franciscan vision to economy, that we transitioned into some vision about integral community development, and now we're going to be turning our focus to a much broader vision. And without saying too much more, I'd like now to invite our president, Dr. Chuck Seifert, to please come forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? What a beautiful day. The sun is shining. It's a little chilly, but the sun is shining, so that's always a good day. It's such a pleasure to be here today with you, and I'm so happy to have such a cross-section of people that are attending the event, with students, with prospective students, and faculty, staff, administrators, community members, and everyone just being here together is just an absolutely wonderful thing. So thank you all so much for being here. But what's most inspiring to me right now is knowing that it's clear that today's conversations have already had an effect. Throughout the day, we've been invited to slow down, to listen, to reflect, and to see our world through an integrated lens. We begin with reflections grounded in the Franciscan tradition, reminders from Bishop John Stowe and Brother Ryan Thornton that St. Francis's vision of creation calls us all into making sure we move towards humanity, relationship, and in an economy that is inclusive. We then explored that integral ecology and community development are intertwined as well, and we looked at what that can look like in practice. We heard from partners from across the Capital Region and honestly from around the globe who are doing the work in a most meaningful and concrete way. Together, these sessions have reinforced a very important truth. Integral ecology is not theoretical, it is lived. It shows up in the choices we make, the systems we design, and the priorities we elevate. This moment matters, not only for Siena, but for the world we all share. We are facing complex, interconnected challenges and demand more than isolated solutions. They require imagination, they require courage, and they require a willingness to rethink long-standing assumptions about growth, success, and responsibility. They require each and every one to ask not only what works, but for whom does it work and at what cost. This is why Siena is a place where these conversations belong. Our Franciscan mission calls each and every one of us to place people, dignity, care for creation at the center of our work. As a university, we strive to prepare students not just for careers, but for lives of purpose, and to model as an institution what responsible leadership can look like in a time of global uncertainty. We are especially grateful to Amy Dominy for joining us today and for the example that she has set throughout her career. Her vision of an economy rooted in fairness, justice, sustainability, and respect for human rights challenges us to believe that markets can and must serve the common good. We are honored to learn from her perspective today as we continue this important dialogue. And as we move into the keynote, I invite you to carry forward the spirit of today's sessions. Be open, be curious, and be willing to imagine what becomes possible when people and planet are treated not as competing interests, but as inseparable partners in our shared future. Thank you for being a part of this remarkable day, for the work that each and every one of you do now and will be doing moving forward to imagine a more just and sustainable world. Thank you. At this time, I invite Catherine Williamson to deliver a special message. Catherine is a junior marketing major from South Africa and a member of Sienna's water polo team. Catherine is involved in an incredible amount of activities. She is on the student advisory board for the School of Business, an intern in the Marketing and Communications Office, works with the Sienna Beverage Institute. We won't talk too much about that. The Sienna Research Institute, campus ministry, is a CA, and just the other day served with me on a webinar talking to prospective students. But most importantly, Catherine says, "I love it here." So join me in welcoming Catherine. Earlier this week, Sienna received a letter from Cardinal Pierre, the Apostolic Nuncio, passing along a message from Cardinal Parolin, the Vatican's Secretary of State, and Pope Leo.
Dear President Seifert, I am pleased to forward to you the following message on the occasion of the symposium, Reimagining Economy for People and Planet. His Holiness Pope Leo XIV sends cordial good wishes to all those who are taking part in the symposium, Reimagining Economy for People and Planet, at Siena University on February 5th, 2026. His Holiness was pleased to learn that the conference will discuss the ethical role of the economy in fostering integral community development, as well as the challenges of climate change. He prays that all will recognize the urgent need to take measures on the local, national, and international level to care for creation. In this regard, he trusts that your efforts will seek to promote financial systems that will not be simply machines that produce, but rather activities that restore life to people and communities, as well as to our common home. Moreover, the Holy Father hopes that particular attention will be paid to addressing the impact of the current environmental crisis on the poorest and most vulnerable populations, as they are often the first victims of its effects. In this way, he is confident that, in this year dedicated to St. Francis of Assisi, you will be inspired to imitate the example of this great saint who lived in harmony with God, his neighbor, and nature. With these sentiments, Pope Leo XIV cordially invokes upon all participating an abundance of Almighty God's blessings. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Secretary of State. I will now welcome Dean Asudani from the School of Business.
Good evening, everybody. The day started at 9:30 a.m. this morning. It's been a little over 7 hours that we've been having these conversations, but I'll tell you, it's been more than almost a year that we've been preparing for this day, and what a fulfilling day this has been. We've moved from talking about the choices and the agency that we have to the power of connectedness, to the complexity in doing this work. When we think about reimagining economy for planet and people, it's not an easy task to do. And then we talked about a plate of spaghetti, how messy and complex this work is, and the role of human dimension in this. All in all, we're getting to the finale of the day with our keynote address, We will be talking about societal impact and investing with purpose. And in order to facilitate that, I have my great privilege to introduce to you Dr. Andrea Smith-Hunter. Dr. Andrea Smith-Hunter is a professor of management at Siena University. She formerly worked as a financial and then marketing analyst at Exxon Corporation. Andrea's research interests include women entrepreneurship across racial, ethnic, and economic lines. She has published over 45 journal articles in various reputed journals. Her first book, Diversity and Entrepreneurship, Analyzing Successful Women Entrepreneurs, was published in 2003, and her second book, Women Entrepreneurship Across Racial Lines, Issues of Human Capital, Financial Capital, and Network Structures, was published in 2006. Her third book, Women Entrepreneurs in the Global Marketplace, was critically acclaimed and looked at women entrepreneurs from a worldwide perspective and was published in 2013. She has two upcoming books, Indigenous Women Entrepreneurs on the North American Continent and Women Entrepreneurs on the African Continent. She's a past holder of the Hickey Chair in Business at Siena University and endowed faculty position. She was appointed in 2009 as an advisory board member to the White House Council for Women and Girls, contributing her expertise regarding minority women entrepreneurs, and she has been a Fulbright specialist twice. Please welcome Dr. Andrea Smith-Hunter.
Thank you, Rashmi. Good evening. Earlier today, Bishop Stowe presented on the Franciscan values of engaging the world through the lens of St. Francis of Assisi. Brother Ryan discussed Franciscan approaches to the economy that are inclusive and holistic. Kirsten Moy discussed approaches to societal impact and integral community development. In a few minutes, we'll have Amy Dominy, our keynote speaker, and she will share her vision of an economy that promotes fairness, equality, justice, long-term sustainability, and respect for human rights. These values are closely aligned to what we have here at Siena University. Following the presentation, Ms. Dominy will be joined by speakers from the day in a panel discussion. But first, an introduction. Amy Dominy has lived a life of purpose. She's widely recognized as a pioneer of socially responsible and impact investing. At the time, Ms. Dominy asked a simple but transformative question. What if our investments reflected our values as well as our social goals? In 1990, she helped launch what is now known as the Dominy Impact Equity Fund, one of the first socially responsible mutual funds available to the general public. This fund broke new ground by screening companies not only for financial performance, but also for environmental practices, treatment of workers, respect for human rights, and corporate governance. Amy has also played a central role in creating the Dominy 400 Social Index. It's the first benchmark designed to track the performance of social responsible companies. This index demonstrated something that was very important. Investing ethically did not require sacrificing competitive or financial returns. In fact, it proved that companies that focused on long-term sustainability could thrive and remain profitable. In recognition of her work, Ms. Dominy has received numerous awards and honors, including being named one of Time Magazine Heroes of the Environment. In 2006, she was awarded an honorary Doctor of Business Administration degree from Northeastern University College of Law. Yale University's Berkeley Divinity School presented Ms. Dominy with an honorary doctorate in 2007. She's a past board member of the Church Pension Fund of the Episcopal Church in America and the National Association of Community Development Loan Funds, an organization whose members work to create funds for grassroots economic development loans. Recently, She was honored with the highly prestigious ICCR Legacy Award, recognizing her significant contributions to the field of responsible investing and her influence on corporate politics. This award is given to individuals whose work has established a lasting foundation for investor action on social and environmental issues. Most importantly, Ms. Domini has emphasized through her actions and the way she has lived her life, how to live a life that has purpose. After her presentation today, I believe that in the coming days, over the next days, weeks, and months, you'll ask yourself the same question: how do I live a life of purpose? Please join me in welcoming a true trailblazer, an icon, a hero, and a pioneer of social investing, someone who's deeply involved in giving back to people, the planet, while still encouraging the making of profits. Ms. Amy Domini. No, I don't have yours. They must have taken it somewhere. I get them from Rashmi. I get them.
Thank you. I have a technical issue. My remarks have been removed from the podium. So in the meanwhile, I will, yeah, my remarks were right here. In the meanwhile, I'll be happy to tell you.
Shout to them.
I did, for a portion, thank
Come see me in
you.
my office hours.
I didn't recognize myself in the introduction, and I wouldn't have recognized myself without these comments here. I did at one point in my career run a 3-hour seminar on the topic I'm about to cover, so I probably could have filled the space without these notes, but they kind of make me feel safe. I'm hoping over the next 20 minutes to a half hour to introduce you a little bit to the trajectory I followed, and my life is the life of responsible investing in this century. It has pretty big overlap between the two, but also I'm hoping to acknowledge the fact that when I sat in seats like the ones you're sitting in, I did not have a clue where I was going. I was 6 weeks away from graduation when I was from college, when I was speaking with a friend of mine who said to me, "What are you going to do after college?" And it was, whoa, there's an after college? And I said, I really haven't thought about that. And she said, "I'm going to learn how to type." And I said, good idea. and I spent the following summer learning how to type. I'll come back to that in a couple of minutes, but that was just how driven I was at this stage in my life. My life in finance, in a way, I trace to about my age 16. You might gather from my name, have an Italian father. He shortened the name, it was Vigidomini. But I also have an American grandfather. And I lived next door to my American grandfather as a child. He was a gardener, and he used to have a cutting garden. This was a garden that was exclusively for my grandmother to go cut flowers in and bring them in and make pretty vases in the house. And one of the aspects of the cutting garden was dahlias. Each fall, we would dig up the dahlia bulbs and put them in a barrel of sawdust, move them to the basement of his house. And in the spring, we would get out the barrel and we would see if any of the dahlias had more than one nub growing out of them so that we could cut that bulb into parts. And he would award me with a smaller portion of the bulbs for my efforts. And we would grow the gardens, and then he would tell me what a shame it was that I didn't have the nicest flowers, that somehow in the luck of the draw he'd gotten them all. But one year, on this year, I got the big white ones. I'm sure they had a name, but neither of us knew the names, and I got the superior flowers. So the first thing I remember about that day was he was mad. And because he was mad, he was grouchy. And that was a trait that he was capable of quite a bit. So I was careful as he started in the garden work and giving me a lecture about his latest complaint, which was that CEOs of corporations and the managers of corporations were overpaying themselves outrageously. This is back in the 60s when it was pennies compared to what it is today. And I hesitated, knowing that his temper was a little short that day, but finally I said to him, I guess I don't know what a shareholder is. And he stopped in astonishment. Now, I had a grandmother, his wife was named Amy. So she was Amy Deer, and I was Amy D. He stopped and he stared at me. He said, well, Amy D., it's time you learned a thing or two. And he marched me into the house, and there he had a stack, really 3 foot high, of annual reports. They used to be in paper form, and, stack them up. He'd look at annual reports for pleasure. And he took me over to see these annual reports, and he said to me, this is how you read an annual report. Every company has shareholders, and they have to report to the shareholders. So the first thing you want to know is, are they reporting honestly? To find that out, you look at the back. That's where the auditor's statement is. And from there, he started to, and I kind of took it in. I thought it was a very grown-up conversation. I was pretty interested in it. And then the years went by, and I had that conversation about learning how to type. And I learned how to type, and in spite of that excellent education, I still couldn't get a job. And my grandfather stepped in again, and he called a friend who worked at a brokerage firm, and he said, she'll do anything. And they said, fine, she can be in the copy room. Now, this was in the days when you had a copy room. People carried a piece of paper and they left it on the counter, and you would go to the machine and you would make a copy of it, and then a couple of times a day you'd go out with a little rolling cart and give the copies of the paper to all the people who had delivered something to be copied in your office. From this stellar introduction to Wall Street, I managed to promote myself to being the secretary to the secretary of the CEO. And after 2 years, there was a financial collapse going on, and I saw all these important men, I thought, making a lot more money than I was. And I thought, well, they're no smarter than I am because their clients are losing money hand over fist. So I asked the CEO, could I become a stockbroker? I had no idea what a stockbroker was. I just knew that they made more money than I did. And I also didn't know that 4 women at Merrill Lynch had recently sued that company because they weren't getting the job. And my CEO was very aware of what was going on in the industry, and he said, well, sure you can be. And it was 5 years before somebody introduced me as the first woman and the sales team at Tucker Anthony Arnold. I had no idea I was the first woman. My mind just hadn't gone that way. When you're in that job, you have to build up your client base. I built up my client base by offering a class on the ABCs of investing at Cambridge Center for Adult Education. In order to know what to say on Thursday night, I went to a class at Babson College and took ABCs of investing on Tuesday nights. Then I would come back, and on Thursday nights I'd teach it. This went on for a couple of years, and I started to build a client base, and then the strangest thing happened. I would get pushback from clients. They would say things like, I'd really rather not make money by buying bombs, or I'd really rather not make money in the tobacco industry, or, I'm a bird watcher, don't you? These people make dioxin. Yeah, and I suddenly thought, holy cow, it's hard enough to get a client. Now I have to worry about the companies that I'm talking about and whether or not these clients find them appropriate. So I went searching. This was prior to the time of computers, but there was a computer at Boston College. Longhand wrote them a letter, told them that I had keywords I was hoping their computer could find me newspaper articles about, put down words, ethics, stocks, morals, bonds, investing, things like that. Got back in 3 weeks a letter saying, here are some articles of interest. And they were all about the ethics of mother-child bonding or something completely irrelevant, except for one, which was called Pax World Fund. It was about a mutual fund where they wouldn't buy weapons. And there's a there. Somebody else in the world is doing this. There's a there. I'm going to offer a course on this topic at Cambridge Center for Adult Education. And I told a friend of mine who was an Episcopal church priest that I was going to do that. He thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. He said, oh yeah, and then you should write a book about it. And I was really kind of ticked off. They said, okay, wise guy, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book about it. So I put the book little outline together using the course I'd been teaching, adding in some ethical verbiage around it. And the course catalog went out at Cambridge Center for Adult Ed. Amy Dominy teaching a new course, ethical investing. Bang. 4 times as many people signed up for it, and the next day I got a phone call from a publisher. Would you like to write a book on the topic you're teaching about? Sure would. Have an outline ready for you, in fact. It's a little work, but, I can show an outline to you. And I found myself in a pretty mad rush to learn something about the topic that I was supposedly expert enough about to write a book and teach a course. From there, it worked. I did meet people in the class who taught me an awful lot, and through the effort to find the book, I found networks of people doing something kind of like what I was talking about. In the meanwhile, pressure was building up over the state of condition in South Africa. There was a problem there. The majority of the population had no vote. And there was global focus on this issue going on. There was talk about a code of conduct, and the companies that were doing business, American companies that were doing business there, ought to sign this code of conduct and report out on progress that their presence was making toward remedying this inequity that was going on. This code of conduct affected 75% of South African employers, the business interests of publicly traded companies. And that became headlines day after day. I mean, in Cambodia, people were being slaughtered. You didn't hear a word about it. You heard about some child on a bicycle falling over and people helping them get up in South Africa. It was, you can't imagine what focus we had in America on it, and every college, every library, every school wanted to have a speaker about South Africa. And I had just written the book, Ethical Investing. So I was invited to go to all of these places, and in every place I learned the same 2 objections. That would be illegal, because you obviously can't make money that way. And who says what is good? You say potato, I say potato. Surely there's something bad about everything. And these 2 objections became my goal. I had to remove these objections, or my whole newfound exciting line of business was gone. So I worked on that, and through time, as was mentioned earlier, created an index of our own, an index that would try to pick from the better half of companies. And what do we mean by better half? They address the issues that are unique to them. So you can be a company in a dirty industry and be the best player in that dirty industry. Or you can be a company in a clean industry and still be horrendous in some of the things we care about. The Dominy 400 Index was launched. It actually caught on more in Europe and overseas than it did in the United States. It was considered a very important contribution to the field. and it outperformed the Standard & Poor's for the first 20 years that it existed, which created a whole dialogue change. I was surprised at that. After all I was doing was collecting more information than the next team of analysts. Consider two companies. You know, you have one company that has 2 product safety recalls and one company that has 10. You have one company that has a relatively diverse management team, board of directors, and one company that hasn't discovered yet there are 2 genders on the planet. You have a company that has recently closed down their facilities for the retirement accounts and opened up a 401k with a lousy match, and another one that has an above-average match. You go through these kinds of things, and what are you really learning? You're learning that one company has an asleep-at-the-switch management team, and the other one has a kind of in-the-world, thinking-about today's problems management team. And having earned at great disappointment due to the time sink, my chartered financial analyst designation, I recognized that the single most difficult thing to analyze when you're analyzing a company is the quality of management. And I seem to have stumbled across a quantitative way of making an assessment of the quality of management. And who wouldn't want that when investing? So we moved on, the years went on, and I began to learn about other people in the field and the things they were doing. I won't go through all of the steps, but we now say that we are a 3-legged stool. If you've ever seen a 3-legged stool, it falls down if one leg is missing, as opposed to a 4-legged stool, which will still stand. And what are the legs of our industry? One, we set standards for the companies we will buy shares of, or for the debt we will buy debt in, or for the venture capital we will put venture capital in. We set standards on the investments that we will make. The next one is that we attempt to be activists as shareholders. It was mentioned I was on the board of the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church is part of the Anglican Communion. The Anglican Communion, the sun never set on the Anglican Communion, and it was the Anglican Church in South Africa that had launched the whole Sullivan Principles, and well, they didn't write those, that was a different, but they launched the environment within which Americans were looking for a way to address the issues in South Africa. And they were one of 3 founders of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, which was mentioned earlier as the place I recently was given a legacy award from. Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility is a network of faith-based organizations that file shareholder dialogues with companies. And I became involved with and on the board of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility and started filing shareholder dialogues, which fortunately now I had a mutual fund with lots of stocks and lots of companies and was able to take lots of opportunities to extend the dialogue. Do you think you can make a difference? You know, I kind of feel like I did. You know, when we started out having dialogues with companies, we'd hear a report. The government of Uzbekistan mobilizes hundreds of thousands of people every harvest season to get the cotton because it's a rush job and because it's a nation that doesn't have strong laws over the worker force. It's a very large child population of labor in that. So we talked with Levi Strauss, Limited Brands, Marks & Spencer, Target, Tesco, and other companies that purchased cotton and asked them under what condition they would consider not purchasing cotton based on the human implications of how that cotton was grown. And we had agreements from every one of the companies I just mentioned. as activists, we briefed the Congressional Human Rights Caucus on how to address genocide and other crimes against humanity in Darfur. We were the only financial services representative at that congressional briefing. We got an agreement with Kimberly-Clark over their forestry practices. It takes a lot of trees to make their products. Those products now are certified Forest Stewardship Council. The third leg of the field is community development financial institutions. You've heard a fair amount about those earlier today. In a publicly traded environment like a mutual fund, that's a no-go. There's no daily pricing. I can't go out to my shareholders and say that loan is worth that much today. So we did the next best thing. We look for bonds, which are loans, just the way a loan to a loan fund or a bank deposit is a loan. And we look for bonds that meet certain community needs. The bond of the hospital that's expanding their healthcare facility in an underserved community. The bond that is offered by a business that is attempting to build solar panels and take more pressure off the grid. These three things, setting standards to what we will buy, being activist shareholders, and supporting community development initiatives. These are the things that responsible investors do. You're going to notice I keep changing my words. Am I an impact investor? Am I an ethical investor? Am I a socially responsible investor? I am very tired of the vocabulary changes in this industry. And I kind of wish I could just go back to being an ethical investor, but nobody would know what I'm talking about. It's important to remember that humans and their needs are expansive. We have basic needs, goods and services, food, clothing, shelter, perhaps education, communication. We like comforts of humankind, and we also have certain wants. And I'm not here to argue against the wants, but we as individuals have a responsibility in this whole pattern of things I've been talking about. We want everything. We want that car with the nice seat covers that clean easily. And the result is that in Liberia, there are rubber trees being tapped by workers who work under a quota which would take 20 hours a day to meet. And therefore, they bring their children to work to get to the quota because they don't get paid anything until that quota is met. In La Roya, Peru, there's a smelter, a lead smelter. It runs 3 shifts a day, 3 8-hour shifts, 24 hours a day it's running there. I'm 4th generation lead poisoning in that village. They will never recover from that area. Those children will not recover, those lands will not recover. And we have our lead batteries, and some CEO has built the largest house in the Hamptons in New York State. In Nigeria, the gas flares for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The toxins run off in the soil and the water. Residents asked to meet with management. They were met by armed men who took them captive, tortured them, and killed them. And we have our plastic cushions, and shareholders made a profit, and some portfolio manager did better than others and feels darn good about the job he does. I'm just going to share 2 more of these. 2009, 2 judges pled guilty to taking more than $2.6 million in kickbacks to send teenagers to privately run youth detention centers. An estimated 5,000 juveniles were sent to the centers that gave these judges the kickbacks. And the majority were first-time offenders. 1 girl got 3 weeks for being rude to her assistant principal. All her college applications were acceptances were rescinded. These privately run youth detention centers, for-profit prisons. I mean, have we gone mad? And just to say on the for-profit prisons, going back to 2003, we're well before ICE here, a certain man picked up for being Mexican, never charged, thrown in the prison, given some time to think about it. It was the middle of winter. It was December. There was no heating. The toilets exploded. They went 2 weeks without repairing the toilets that filled it. By the time he was found, he was covered in gangrene. He lost one leg, but did recover from the incident. At least he was alive at the end of it all. And it was a for-profit prison. And the corporate owner made the profits, and some manager somewhere got a bonus. This is wrong. And this is not being addressed by government. And we had a chance at lunch today, and I said a lot of what we're doing here in this field is addressing some of the failures of government, some of the failures of civil society to take action and to take personal responsibility. I don't believe investments are neutral. I believe, and I'm comfortable saying, that you're either an ethical investor or not ethical investor. You're either a moral investor or not a moral investor. And I want to give you a sense of why I think it's important. I was invited to put up a slide. I thought I would try to make this slide, and it was just too much, so I'm going to ask you to use your imagination. When I was little, my brothers liked to play with Tonka toys, those little teeny little cars this big. And if you can imagine a Tonka toy here in front of you and a Hummer here, that Tonka toy represents the dollar volume in the real world, in global GDP trade. That Hummer represents the dollar volume of financial asset management trades. Year to year, it's a 100-to-1 difference between how much money is whirling around, trading off of the backs of the real world. So how are you going to address the needs in the real world if you ignore that Hummer? You can't. You have to infiltrate the belly of the beast and pervert it to do good. And whenever I get up and I speak to an audience like this, I'm not speaking to explain to you what I do or explain to you what the industry is. I'm here to try to convert you, to try to convince you. This is important, and this is how you make a difference in the world. There was once Diderot was a philosopher, and he wrote an essay on parting with my dressing gown, and a friend gave him a new fine dressing gown, and he wore it around, lorded it in his office, and decided his pillows needed upgrading. And he got himself some new pillows and then lorded around in his office and decided his curtains needed upgrading. And put up new curtains and lorded around in his office and felt pretty good about it until he thought some of his books needed upgrading. And he walked into his office and he realized actually he himself didn't belong there anymore. It is important to take the right first step, and you may not have the courage to go out in the streets and wave a flag or the courage to fight somebody in a courtroom, but it's a simple step to take to become an ethical investor and to become a little bit more of the solution than you were the day before you took that step. I am hoping I can give one more anecdote. It takes a terrible situation to get people universally to understand their individual responsibility. But my mother, who's now 99, is a member of the greatest generation. I can't talk too much about her actions at age 99 in assisted living, but at age 89, she was still volunteering twice a week at the school as a teacher, a member of 4 reading groups. She volunteered at the homeless shelter. She would lead little tours through a particular park that had nice Florida fauna in it. And each day before she left on these activities, she'd pack a thermos with her coffee and a sandwich, which would go into a wax paper that she would fold around it. And each day when she came home, she'd take out those things, wash the thermos, and wipe down that wax paper and leave it on the counter for use the next day. And had to get really worn out before we left. And that same story rolled out with cards came in, birthday card, Christmas card, cut off the cover and use that card again next week. The ribbon came in, put that ribbon aside, the candle burned down. Wonderful thing for getting your drawers to be less sticky or getting your windows to roll more easily, saving all those things. She learned that during World War II. Her brothers and father, her friends, were fighting and dying. She was not going to be selfish. She was never going to be selfish again. I'm sorry she's dying. So I'll sober up and I'll say a severe shock to the system sometimes brings a change. And I'm highly hopeful we're living through that kind of shock to the system right now. And that each of us will understand our personal responsibility. I'd like to thank you for listening to my words. I could have gone into a great deal more detail on each of those points, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was so inspiring. And as I said before, after Amy's speech, I know you will say to yourself, how can I live a life of purpose? That will be with you, ringing for the next days, weeks, and months. At this point, we're going to get a little bit more informal, and we're going to ask some questions that students had expressed they wanted to know before. And we'll start with the first one. How has the perception of socially responsible investing changed since you first entered the field?
I'm on?
Yeah.
Okay. So the core areas that I discussed, setting standards, taking an activist role, engaging in developing a community of people, those things are still in place. There have been a great many changes in the world, and that causes us to develop something. I mean, you know, Burma, Myanmar, had not been a conversation when I got started. It became a conversation. So there were new issues that developed. The introduction of the vocabulary environmental, social, and governance, ESG, was pretty profound difference because it was vocabulary that was comfortable for large Wall Street firms to use. They kind of didn't like ethical. They kind of didn't like that kind of vocabulary. But ESG was vocabulary, it was a door opener. I had a personal objection to it because I think the planet's pretty important. I think people are pretty important. I don't think shareholders are that important. And so I didn't see what the G was all about, you know? But nonetheless, it did open doors, and that was a helpful thing. I think there's a good deal more sophistication in each of the three. Right now, shareholder activism is under a great deal of attack. The Securities Exchange Commission is not too interested in shareholder access to the ballot box, but these things come and go, and we'll hope this one goes.
Second question, if you were starting your career today, what, if anything, would you do differently?
I don't think anybody needs to learn how to type anymore. Probably have that one down, if only with two thumbs. So, I was extremely fortunate to have been put in a very uncomfortable position in my first job. The last thing in the world I knew how to do or wanted to do was find people to trust me. I was a kind of a conventional 1950s kid, you know, I certainly didn't want to put myself out as an authority of some sort or anything like that. And yet I was pretty bored in that copy room, and I, you know, was having a chance here at a real career that, as far as I knew, only important men had. And so I did enter into very uncomfortable space for myself, and I found a way to make it comfortable, which was teaching. And there is some way to make it comfortable, that uncomfortable place, and it's probably worth thinking about it. I almost felt like I was cheating, getting new clients by doing something that was so much fun, going out in the evening and talking about interesting stuff with people. So it was, so be willing to get in that uncomfortable place, but also be creative about how to protect yourself.
So whatever situation you're in, try to make the most of it and make it a positive. Yep. Absolutely. All righty. Our third question, when you're evaluating impact, what do you look for? And what is the challenge of measuring impact?
And thank you. This goes right into the nitty-gritty. We actually have a very, very detailed system. The mutual fund firm selects stocks in a fairly complex way, just like any security analyst. I'd like to explain that most of you recognize that there are many kinds of analysts out there, and let's say you're an expert in deep value investing. You're going to look at the same price to book, price to earnings, the same stability of the revenue stream and stability of the management team and all the kinds of things that the next shop next door to you that is also deep value is going to look at, and you're going to have different portfolios. Everybody in my field has the same thing. We look at a series of what we consider to be key performance indicators in each industry. And most of those key performance indicators are addressing the challenge unique to that industry. I mentioned in the comments about cotton. One of the problems of the garment industry is how you source what you sell. There's a whole lot of incentive to build the clothes you sell, to manufacture them in places with lower labor costs and lower safety rules over how the product is made. We recognize that. We recognize you'll be out of business in 2 months if you don't do such things. But how do you address that problem that you have? Do you have a code of conduct? Is your code of conduct verified by third-party inspections at that site? We have specific key performance indicators that are focused on the issue that that kind of a company and that kind of an industry faces. And then we rank order within the industry and look to see what happens. If it turns out that in an industry, 1 or 2 companies pass the standards, it may be the way the cookie crumbles, but it's oftentimes that the indicators are wrong. Then we need to address the indicators more broadly, be more imaginative, find a new one. And this is the way everybody in the field does it. We essentially look at stakeholders. So we're looking at the customer, we're looking at the community, we define that globally. We're looking at the manufacturing practices, we're looking at the environmental systems impact of what they do, and we're looking how they conform to the norms and the international standards for whatever the issue is that we're looking at. It's complex, it's exciting. We have a big meeting afterwards. The analyst gives the presentation. There are 10 of us around the table. We question some of the companies. The analyst will come in and say, it's on the edge. I could go either way on this one. And we'll spend a good deal of time
on it. I read your book.
This is a soft one.
It talks about the people, planet, and profit. And one of the things you mentioned was opening a box with a pair of shoes and how they had explained in the box the impact making the shoes had on the planet and just sourcing everything, and how you like that because you said that everything that is documented can be measured and evaluated. Explain that a little bit.
Well, my mind's going in two directions on that. On the conversation I just had up there, I started a little bit talking about some of the important things of the debate over U.S. corporations doing business in South Africa. That's really where I learned this lesson. The Sullivan principles, if you look at them today, are the most simplistic principles. How many blacks supervise how many coloreds and how many whites? Are the cafeterias blended employee, or are they segregated employees? They were very simple, yes, no, fill in the number questions. And from that, fill in the question, yes, no, came an understanding that American companies were not ameliorating the situation for the majority in South Africa. They were aiding and abetting a system, a grip on that nation. And once those numbers had proven that American companies were not making things better, as the Reverend Leon Sullivan had expected would be the case when he proposed this lineup, international outrage grew to the point where, oh my Lord, sports teams would not compete in South Africa. Well, the world ground to a halt on that news. I mean, sports stopped, suspended the sacred entertainment on Sunday afternoons. It was a snowball that led to, Cambridge, Massachusetts wouldn't buy Ford motor cars for their police force because they also manufactured in South Africa. This kind of thing spun out in all kinds of unexpected ways, but Nelson Mandela did feel that it was the focus that Americans had, particularly the divestment focus that Americans had, that gave him the special tool to come to the negotiating table at that time. From that, I learned data makes knowledge. Knowledge makes pressure, makes social change.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. The session, the one-on-one session with you has kind of ended, unfortunately. At this time, I'd like to invite previous speakers of the day onto the stage. Bishop Stowe, Father Ryan, Kristen Moy, and Brother Jimmy, who will assist me with the co-hosting. We'll just continue with the question and answer sessions for our panelists, and we'll start with a question students had for Amy and Kirsten. What skills do you think business students should develop now if they want to work in sustainable finance or impact investing?
Amy, do you want to start with that? What skills people need?
Just been talking.
Okay. Oh boy. Well, I have a confession to make first. I've worked in investing, social investing all my life, and actually, I'm not really an analyst. I don't do Excel, and I think for me, my theory is you can always get good help executing things, but you can't always get good help thinking about things. Okay. So it was more important for me to get the theory and the thoughts right. And that's why that complexity framework helps me. The things I talked about this morning help. The way you think about it, for me, was the most important thing. Once I could think about it in a reasonably profitable way and get input from other good people, I could always find people with the skills, the computer skills or the writing skills or whatever to help.
So the ability to find the right people with the right talent.
Yes, that's important, yeah.
All right, excellent. The second question was, how can young professionals influence corporate responsibility when they're new to an organization and might not have decision-making power?
For me?
Either you or Amy.
Amy.
For the first session, and then we'll open it up.
Okay. Amy, you want to take that one? 'Cause I don't have a clue.
I need to hear it again.
All right, repeating the question. How can young professionals influence corporate responsibility when they don't yet have decision-making power? I actually related this back. The student produced these questions, but I related this back to what Amy said in her book about the secret to making a difference is small. One small action at a time.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that one small action at a time. And I also want to say, I think that the new kid on the block in a corporate setting has more influence and impact than they recognize. You're always, as a manager, as a boss, hoping that something that's been lost or unnoticed or hidden there, some solution, is before your eyes and you've failed to see it. And it's very helpful to have new ideas or even just pushback on what you're doing. I am currently reviewing an advertisement. I said, gee, these happy little kids playing in the field leave me cold. I got quite a lot of pushback on that, that young families like to see happy children. We're going after young families, blah, blah, blah. And, I don't know. I will test it. We'll see. I'll be right or I'll be wrong. But I was happy to get that pushback. I was happy to get, to have somebody engage with, to sharpen our thinking on the whole. There were other images besides happy young children, but you do have more influence than you feel you have. I also, however, think it's always important to recognize I have a lot of trouble trusting you with job 2 if I feel you didn't put your heart in job 1. Yeah, so it may seem like a dumb assignment or something, but to a certain extent, it's your boss seeing what kind of personality you have, not what capacity you have. So I would also just, not be too dismissive of the simple things.
Yeah, being enthusiastic about whatever you're doing.
If I could add one thing, what you bring as a new person, is a new perspective, all right? So often you can get pretty stale in a corporation and you don't hear a lot of new ideas. You, on the other hand, coming in just now, that's what your superpower is. You've got a new perspective. And if you want people to start listening to you, I would say use that new perspective and help them with something that they care about. Not necessarily the cause that you want, but something that they're struggling with or they care about. Show yourself useful there, and then they'll be more likely to listen to you on the next thing.
Okay, thank you. Earlier today, Kirsten, you talked about doing things that have multiple impact. Expand on that for this audience.
Impact, okay. Well, I said that everything was connected, all right? So that whatever you do, you're going to have impact on more than just the one thing that you're targeting, all right? And with scarce resources, we need to do more with what we have. So, for instance, if you're doing some kind of, well, doctors do it all the time, actually. They may treat one condition, let's say weight, all right? But if they can help someone lose some weight or whatever, they improve not only your cardiovascular health probably, but possibly bone, right? I mean, so it happens in medicine all the time. And if you're talking about like housing, for instance, or community, if you build something that is central to the community, you're helping more than one thing, okay? But we know that housing is related to health. We know that food is related to health, and that you need all these things in the community. So I would say if you're going to start doing something, see what other impacts that will be. And you can read about it now. You can read that you know, housing is the center of so many other things.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. I'm going to turn it over to Brother Jimmy, who's going to ask a few questions.
Yeah, thank you. And to begin, so with you, Bishop Stowe, so try and bring in the whole day together. So in light of what we've heard kind of throughout the day with some these wonderful speakers on the economic side, how might religious institutions, be it a diocese, a school, a parish, or simply like as believers, like how might we respond to this and take part in kind of what we're hearing?
Well, I'm really intrigued by the last question and answer about the role of young people and newcomers, and I think that's something the church and religious institutions need to take much more seriously. The synod on youth that happened during the pontificate of Pope Francis was trying to get the voices of young people to give us the kind of pushback and feedback that we need for the way we always do things. So that's one area right there. We've also recognized that the young people have a passion for the environment and for being able to hand on God's gifts of creation to the next generation. And so to engage that in a more holistic way, in a more productive way would be very good. And even that idea of simply doing something, something we try to do in the diocese where I am in Lexington, Kentucky, we have committed to being carbon neutral by 2030. It's a big commitment for an institution like that, especially in a place where coal industry has dominated for such a long time. So we're trying to bring about those changes, but it would be an empty promise if it didn't involve every single parish having their own input, having their own pathway to get there, and having the ability to buy in ways that are meaningful for them. So I think that's how I would bring this together.
No, yeah, thank you for that. And I think it's a kind of a great insight to, even when we look at these like big institutions and big problems, it's at the end it's people who are a part of this, and it's people taking those steps to work towards those different solutions. And so then passing to you, Father Ryan, so you discussed earlier in the day about really this kind of long tradition of our Franciscan economic history, some principles that have come with that. So what can we learn from that tradition and bring that into the response of modern kind of problems, but systems that we're up against?
I'm going to try to do a quick analysis and relate it to what Amy shared, which is beginning in the Franciscan tradition, the friars commit themselves to two principles that are really unheard of. The first is not to use money, physical coins. This is not a big deal, not a huge deal, but it's a big deal because money is not used by all. There's still a lot of trading, business exchanges that are done in kind. But then they make the claim that they're going to only use things without owning them. This sends everybody in a frenzy. It takes over 100 years to work out what this really means or what it doesn't mean. But just going to the point about money, by saying we're not going to use it, they had an outside perspective that allowed them not only to describe capital for the first time, but the fact that something, wine, oil, olive oil, could become capital. And they pioneered, Franciscan pioneered the term capitalization, taking a good and making it into capital that could be used for other purposes, and therefore it had an additional value, an added value. That then would beget the reflection that we saw with Scotus, the Montes Pietatis, where the friars were leading the people into a type of societal change in place of the government, which was often, in various municipalities, complicit with usurious lending practices. They were very happy to let things stay as the status quo because the people in charge, in power, were benefiting. What Amy did in her career, is doing in her career, is that she had a new framework. that you could have actually ethical principles as something that you would evaluate by. Taking this new concept and then using actual analysis, the tools of the trade, in order to create benchmarks to then decide, well, where would you or where would you not invest, creating an entire index, an index of responsible corporations which were right to invest in. And as she said, in many cases, this was taking the place of what governments should have been doing. The private sector was actually forcing change that the governments themselves weren't able to do. And in this way, we see a parallel, a way that what the friars did in the 15th century, in fact, was done, is possible of being done in the 21st century as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
At this point, we have a general question for all the panelists. And what gives you the most concern and the most hope?
Oh, sorry. What gives you the most concern and the most hope for the future?
Could I answer it later?
Yes. Yes, you can think of.
I'll start. It was alluded to and somewhat overtly mentioned, which is that we are now living in this era in which this new technology called artificial intelligence has begun. And as I've reflected on it, because it still is quite new, this is an area of concern because while I didn't live through it, I see parallels between the beginning of the nuclear age after World War II, the beginning of the Cold War, and the rush to harness this new technology as being analogous. It is a tool. Any tool can be used for good or for ill. That is the nature of humanity. And that is the concern. Will we use this tool for good or for ill? And having taught in a university and getting a number of essays with AI slop, I have a concern. But what is more is that when, as a pastor, I lead young people on retreats and I say we're going to have a post-paleo diet, and they have no idea what I'm talking about, I say, yes, human beings have invented this thing called language. You're going to use it. You're going to put your technology away, and you're going to have real human interaction. It's post-Paleolithic. It is prehistorical. It is now. And they love it. Because the human dimension, which many of the panelists in the mid-morning talk mentioned, is crucial to who we are as human beings. And that is always our hope, that humanity can overcome its limitations by God's grace to do something greater.
Hard act to follow. I'm going to go much simpler. You know, a concern I have is the attack on diversity, and I'm trying to even formulate I don't know, editorial, some kind of pushback on it. But you know, as I mentioned before, my mother's you know, formed by World War II. I am deeply aware of the fact that we were capable of having an unbreakable code because we used Native American language. I'm very aware of the fact that right now, every single person in this room knows more about how to ask what you're doing tomorrow than I do with 4 letters on a keyboard. And the reason you have those 4 letters is because that's the language the deaf used. We are borrowing from the deaf when we use those, I don't know, TGIF kind of things. So we don't know how diversity is going to help us. We just know that there have been cases, important cases, that have helped us. And so on a social level, this is one area that I'm particularly focused on as a worry. I mean, these big things are so big, I just want to crawl under a bed and not put my head out. But that's one I feel like I can tackle.
Yeah, and I share both of those concerns. One of the ones that is really of concern to me at present is the inability to see the same, read the same sources, the inability to have the same information without the lens of a particular party, the lens of a particular persuasion, the commodification of information so that we only get our own feeds in what already we think, and it just reinforces that. And so how do we find truth in a society like that? And how do we talk about what needs to change if we can't even agree on basic facts? That's a real problem for me. The hope is, I think we have the answer to that as well in our tradition. You know, those of us who are Christian worship the Word made flesh. We have a pursuit of truth. I think we have to have humility about how much truth we can already claim to have, but we have the practice of pursuing truth that may take us in directions that we hadn't imagined before.
Thanks. You want to?
I don't know, I hope this doesn't sound snobbish, but I think one of the things I'm most concerned about is the acceptance of mediocrity in life. And I don't mean it's just school, about anything. But no matter what we do in any situation, I think we should do it with some intentionality and with the idea that we should do it well, okay? I mean, even if you're going to eat, you know, you could just grab a sandwich out of a machine, which I did during graduate school, but you can probably do better than that, right? And I think if life is worth living, you should take maybe the time and the thoughtfulness and presence to do it well.
Thank you. Live life to the fullest. That brings to a conclusion our panelists and the questions related. I'll turn it over to Brother Jimmy.
Yes, so it's impossible to go through this day without expressing a number of heartfelt thank yous to all those who make days like this possible. So on behalf of the Laudato Si Center, the School of Business, and the Spirit of 68 Committee, we'd like to thank, in particular, the Spirit of 68 Committee for their support in co-sponsoring of this symposium. In particular, we'd like to thank Jerry DeFrancisco for his tremendous support. Jerry unfortunately couldn't be here today in person, but we know that he's watching online, and Jerry, thank you. Next, gratitude all of our presenters today, who many of you coming from some great distances to be with us today in busy schedules and to share some tremendous insights for our community, for our students, our wider community who's here with us today. So thank you all for being a part of this day and being here. We'd also like to thank our community partners who joined us throughout the day to engage with our students, demonstrate alternative ways for us to engage creatively and effectively with the emerging challenges of our times. I'd also like to thank President Seifert, the Office of the Provost, the administration for their continued support for a deeper integration of the principles and practices of sustainability and integral ecology campus-wide and beyond. A special thanks to the deans of the School of Business, Liberal Arts, and Sciences for their unwavering support. Thank you to all the professors, to the first-year seminar team for supporting this initiative and encouraging students to take part in this symposium. A special thanks to Tom Baldwin and the Board of Trustees for their continued support and encouragement to position Siena University as a leader in integral ecology and sustainability. To the Symposium Organizing Committee, who's been working for nearly a year to organize this symposium. As I was putting these together, I went back and searched my calendar and found our first meeting of March in 2025. For all of the hard work that has gone into this event over the 11 months, keeping front and center the mission and values of Siena University. For AVI, for their work on putting together meals and refreshments for the day, including a wonderful reception to follow that will take place in the rear of the MAC. Please join us. To Chris Berto and the entire events team for their hard work on setting up the space and making sure that we have every table, chair, cord, and more in place to make days like this happen. And a special thanks particularly to Mike Lanello and DreamLab, who put together a lot of the tech and AV that you see around you. To student activities and leadership development, the Office of Community Living and Academic Affairs, who provided support through resources, knowledge, student help to make today run smoothly. All students, all of you who took seriously the invitation to participate in this event, for their commitment to promote a model of economy that places value on promoting the dignity and worth of all human beings, for their concern about the future and environment for all life. To our student volunteers and student workers who helped ensure a smooth experience for all throughout the day and work alongside us friars week in and week out to make the work of our center fruitful. To our university's communications team who helped us spread the word of this event far and wide, also creating some of these tremendous graphics that you've seen on posters and on screen all day long, even at a moment's notice. And to members of the mission team who went beyond the call of duty to ensure the success of the symposium. We'd also like to provide a special thanks to both U.S. Representative Paul Tonko and State Senator Ashby, who this week sent messages of support encouraging us to continue the work that we do here at Siena University, and to the Diocese of Albany and the participation of the Catholic high schools this morning and for their continued support of our initiatives. So we leave today now with what might be next, and what do we see next? On March 24th at 7 p.m., the Great Maloney Room, the SSU, and will also be live streamed. The Laudato Si Center and the Albert Board of Interfaith Dialogue will host interfaith discussion on caring for our common home, a Christian-Muslim dialogue. And so we encourage you to join us for a discussion how interfaith perspectives can inspire and encourage us into action on caring for our common home. And it's also a perfect time for a word of the upcoming symposium. So this is the second of the ongoing symposia, focusing on Earth's Cry, Humanity's Call, thanks to the partnership with the Laudato Si Center for Integral Ecology and the Spirit of 68 Committee. And we are happy to announce today that plans have begun for the next symposium, which will feature the School of Liberal Arts. And we ask you to stand by for future details as we prepare for a full title and dates to be announced in the near future. Thank you all so much for being a part of this great day. And once again, let's give a big round of applause for our speakers and presenters.